What truly burns inside the engine of a combat aircraft? While technically a highly refined kerosene known as JP-8, this exploration reveals the true fuel of military aviation to be something far more profound. Distilled time, the alchemized sunlight of forgotten epochs. The analysis argues that its staggering financial price is merely the surface layer of a much deeper cost paid in geopolitical strategy, global conflict, and an unsettling bargain with the planet's deep past. It uncovers a central paradox of modernity, that our most potent symbols of freedom and dominance are shackled to a fragile dependence on this ancient energy. Having built our global power on this borrowed fire, what will the final reckoning be when the bill comes due?
Have you ever paused to consider the true cost of tearing a hole in the sky? I mean, it's not just about dollars and cents, which, let's be honest, that's often a pretty fleeting kind of human abstraction anyway. I'm talking about something far deeper, something measured in, well, the very fabric of time itself, woven into the planet's history. It's a question that, once you start to really unspool its threads, it just unravels into something genuinely profound. Touches everything from ancient geology right up to modern geopolitics.
You've absolutely hit on the core mystery there. It's a question most of us probably never even think to ask, right? What truly powers a combat aircraft? I mean, on the surface, it sounds simple enough. Kerosene, maybe. But as our sources for today, the cost of carrying a hole in the sky and the fuel of flight, power, cost, and consequence really lay out. It unlocks this hidden history, a history of power, expense, and these far-reaching consequences that are just vastly more intricate and impactful than you could possibly imagine. These sources, they really give us a shortcut, a way to get our heads around this complex topic pretty quickly and thoroughly.
And that's exactly our mission in this deep dive today. We're going to journey through those costs, the visible ones and the invisible ones. We'll move from the literal chemistry, what actually makes a jet fly, all the way to the profound philosophical and geopolitical implications that ripple out across our world. We're going to explore what these sources mean when they talk about the human hunger for power, the relentless cost of empire, and the very chemistry of dominance, written, as they say, in fire and vapor. So yeah, prepare yourself for some genuine aha moments, because the story of jet fuel, in so many ways, it really is the story of us.
It is. It's a really compelling narrative when you dig into it. We'll peel back the layers, connect ideas that might seem totally disparate at first. We're aiming to guide you through a really meticulous, in-depth analysis. Every nook and cranny, like you said, we're not just, reading facts off a page. We want to simplify the complicated stuff. Make sure that anyone listening can really grasp these profound connections between, say, ancient Earth and modern warfare.
All right, let's jump right in then. Let's start with the material heart of flight itself, because as we're about to see, it's so much more than just, humble kerosene.
Indeed. Yeah, at its most literal level, the answer to what fuels these incredible machines is quite specific. It's specialized jet fuel. For military aircraft, we're almost exclusively talking about designations like JP-8, Jet Propellant 8. Its civilian cousin Jet A-1. That's what powers the commercial airliners you or I might fly on. But JP-8 specifically, it isn't just some basic fuel you'd find lying around. It's a highly refined kerosene. Think of it as a kind of predatory celestial cousin to the stuff you might use in a lamp or an old heater.
Yeah.
What's truly astonishing, really, is the sheer engineering marvel behind it.
Okay, I'm curious. When you say highly refined kerosene, what does that actually mean in practice? It sounds almost delicate, like you said, maybe like a fine wine, but then you hear about the incredible forces it has to withstand. What makes it so special beyond just being, combustible fuel? How does it push the boundaries of what's physically possible?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of JP-8's unique character. This stuff isn't just flammable. It's engineered, meticulously designed to perform right at the threshold of physical possibility. It's optimized for the most extreme environments imaginable. I mean, think about this. It has to remain perfectly fluid, flowable, in what the sources call the cryo-hell of 50,000 feet. Up there, ambient temperatures can plummet to like minus 60 degrees Celsius, sometimes even colder.
Wow, minus 60.
Yeah. If it were to freeze or even just thicken up, turn into gel, well, that aircraft would basically be dead in the sky. No fuel flow, no power.
That's an incredible challenge right there, just staying liquid at those extreme lows. But what about the other end of the spectrum? The heat, the combustion side?
Exactly. That's the other side of the coin. Simultaneously, it has to resist combustion with incredible stability. It has to hold on to its immense latent energy, keep it perfectly contained. until the precise microsecond it is commanded to explode inside the engine's combustion chamber. This isn't like gasoline, volatile, eager to ignite. JP-8 has a high flash point.
Meaning it takes more heat to catch fire.
Precisely. It takes significant energy and heat to get it going, which is a crucial safety feature, makes it safer to handle, pump, store. But then when that signal is given, when it's atomized, mixed with compressed air in the engine, boom, it releases this torrent of energy so violent, so concentrated, it can propel a 30-ton Titan of titanium and composites, think an F-16 or an F-35, beyond the speed of sound, or it can lift a massive B-52 Stratofortress loaded down right up into the stratosphere. Chemistry is this marvel of stability and latent fury, a delicate truce between molecules, just waiting for that precise signal to unleash controlled chaos. It's really a testament to material science, chemical engineering.
A delicate truce between molecules. I really like that phrase. It paints such a vivid picture.
Controlled power, right? Immense potential energy held perfectly in check until the exact moment it's needed. And when we talk about how much they use, we're not talking about sipping this stuff, are we? We're talking about an absolutely staggering thirst. Can you give us some concrete examples? Just how much of this meticulously engineered liquid do these aircraft actually gulp down?
You are absolutely right. Thirst is probably an understatement. These machines are incredibly fuel hungry. Take an F-16 Fighting Falcon, a pretty common combat jet. It can easily gulp down thousands of liters of JP-8 in a single sortie.
A sortie being just one mission.
One mission, yeah. Take off to landing. We could be talking over 800 gallons per hour for certain flight profiles, like low-level flight or combat maneuvering. And then you have something like the B-52 Stratofortress, that iconic, lumbering, seemingly eternal bomber. It's even more ravenous. It can drink more than 10 tons of this fuel in just a few hours of flight.
10 tons? How much is that in gallons? 10 tons is over 3,000 gallons. Just imagine the sheer volume of fuel needed just for one of those giants to complete a routine patrol or maybe a training exercise. It's immense.
That is just a staggering amount. And to try and simplify that complex chemical stability you're talking about for a second, think of it like this maybe. JP-8 isn't just a tank of highly flammable liquid. It's more like a tightly coiled spring, perfectly balanced. It's capable of explosive force, sure, but only under precise engineered control. It holds this immense destructive potential, but in a very delicate, almost elegant, engineered order. And that controlled power is what lets these machines perform at their absolute limits, making them instruments of precision, not just, flying explosion.
Absolutely. It's the critical difference between a controlled burn in an engine and an uncontrolled wildfire. And this incredible, meticulously crafted substance, this nectar, as you called it. Well, this takes us to the truly mind-bending part of this deep dive. Because to really understand this fuel, we have to go way, way back, not just to the refinery or the oil well, but to its ancient deep earth origins. It really forces us to ask, where does this miraculous, powerful liquid really come from?
Okay, so we've covered the immediate what of jet fuel, how it functions as this amazing feat of engineering, this precisely calibrated liquid. But now, we're going deeper, way deeper, back through geological time to understand where this nectar actually originates. We're talking millions upon millions of years, right? The actual carbon atoms in that fuel, they were once part of living, breathing organisms. What kind of story does that tell us?
Oh, it tells a story that stretches across eons. It's a profound narrative of planetary memory, really. The sources, they delve deep into its genesis, this almost incomprehensible origin story of these hydrocarbon chains. Those very carbon atoms, the ones that are about to be ignited to propel a jet. They were once locked into the cellulose of, say, towering Carboniferous ferns.
Carboniferous? That's like, 300 million years ago? Dinosaur time?
Even before the dinosaurs, mostly. Around 360 to 300 million years ago, a time when Earth was dominated by these vast swampy forests. Those atoms were also in the chitin of colossal insects.
Chitin, that's like the hard shell.
Exactly, the exoskeleton material. And they were in the very flesh of countless creatures swimming in primordial seas back then. I mean, just try to picture it. For 300 million years, the sun poured its energy onto our planet. And these organisms, through that quiet, consistent miracle of photosynthesis, they captured that sunlight, store that energy right inside their molecular bonds, patiently accumulating.
That is just mind-boggling to think about. 300 million years of captured sunlight just sitting there waiting. And then, okay, these organisms lived, they died, and they got bit, right, layer upon layer upon layer. The dead just settled down, taking their captured sunlight with them. And this wasn't a quick process, was it? This was immense pressure, tectonic forces, the weight of mountains and oceans piling up, and the slow, steady heat from the planet's core acting like a giant pestle and mortar, a kind of planetary alchemy, as you put it. How did that transformation actually happen?
Planetary alchemy is a perfect description, truly. What was once this teeming, vibrant life, this incredibly complex tapestry of plants and animals, it was just crushed, cooked, and ultimately transformed over these unimaginable stretches of time into that dark, viscous slurry we call crude oil. What's so profound here, and this is something the sources really hammer home, is that this substance, it isn't merely a resource, not just something to be extracted and burned. It is, in a very literal sense, but also kind of poetic. It's a planetary memory. It's a vast library of extinct life forms. Every single atom carries a fragment of that ancient past.
Wow.
And the jet fuel we so carefully refined from it, well, it's presented as the most potent, the most explosive passage pulled from that library, ripped from its ancient quiet context and then ignited in the combustion chamber of a machine designed for, well, for dominance, for projecting power and force.
Distilled time and alchemized sunlight. Those phrases from our sources really stick with you, don't they? It makes you realize that every single flight, every time a jet engine roars to life, it's in this really strange way an active. Well, the sources call it temporal necromancy. Like, we're resurrecting the energy of a world we could never truly know, a world that existed long before our species even dreamed of gods or flying, only to expend that ancient energy in a fleeting moment of technological supremacy. That's a heavy concept to grapple with.
It really is. It's a deeply profound thought that our modern marvels, our cutting-edge tools of technology and global reach are powered by something so incredibly ancient, so utterly beyond our immediate experience. We are, in effect, summoning the ghosts of literally billions of dead organisms, of an entire forgotten ecosystem, just to perform our bidding high up in the skies. Which makes the next question, the one about its cost, seem almost, well, simplistic, doesn't it? Because having understood the fuel's deep time origin, its immediate tangible cost, the money, it feels like just the very beginning of a much, much larger story. The financial price tag. It's just the first layer of a far deeper, more complex accounting.
It absolutely does. Yeah, the question, is it expensive? Now feels like we're just barely scratching the surface, like talking about pocket change compared to the grand sweep of geological time we just discussed. But okay, let's start there anyway. Let's get into what our sources call the vulgarity of money. Because even that shallowest layer of expense, the financial cost, is pretty staggering in its own right. Okay, so we know this fuel is ancient sunlight, distilled time, planetary memory, heavy stuff. Now let's talk about the more immediate tangible cost. Cold, hard cash. Our sources don't shy away from calling this the vulgarity of money, but even this shallow layer of expense is astonishing. A single gallon of JP8. The military might pay anywhere from a few dollars to well over 100, depending on where in the world it's being delivered. How does that massive variation happen?
That's a really critical point to unpack. The price isn't just about the fuel itself, the raw commodity value. It's intricately tied to what the sources describe as this colossal logistical serpent required to get it where it needs to go.
Yeah.
So in peacetime procurement, buying JP8 at a major airbase in the continental U.S., that the cost might hover somewhere between, say, $2 and $4 per gallon. That reflects refining and basic transport costs. But, and this is the key, when you move that fuel to war zones or remote operational areas, the fully burdened cost of fuel, and that's a crucial term in military accounting, it can just skyrocket astronomically. We're talking figures like $30 per gallon. The sources even mention $400 per gallon in some extreme cases.
$400 for 1 gallon?
For 1 gallon delivered.
And when you say a logistical serpent, you really mean it, don't you? It's not just like ordering something online. This isn't Amazon Prime for jet fuel. This fuel has to be refined to these incredibly exacting purity standards first.
Right.
Then transported across vast oceans in these huge super tankers. From there, maybe piped across continents or loaded onto trains or trucks. It needs to be stored safely in fortified depots, often in highly volatile regions, and then finally pumped by a specialized, probably armored, vehicle into the thirsty belly of the aircraft on some windswept, often dangerous flight line. So, the comparison is stark. The price of a gallon you buy at a stateside airbase is just a pittance compared to that same gallon delivered to a forward operating base in a contested zone, where the supply chain itself is constantly a target. Can you elaborate a bit more on what actually gets factored into that fully burdened cost? What does that include?
Absolutely. The fully burdened cost is designed to be a much more honest, comprehensive accounting of the real extents. It encompasses not just the baseline price of the crude oil and the cost of refining it to JP8 specs, but literally every single cost associated with getting that specific gallon of fuel into that specific aircraft's tank. in a specific, often hostile location. So this includes the security forces, soldiers, contractors protecting the oil fields, the tankers, the pipelines, the truck convoys. Think about the danger involved there.
Right, huge risk.
It covers the maintenance of these vast global logistics networks, the ships, the ports, the storage facilities. It includes the personnel involved in every step of transportation and storage. And crucially, it attempts to factor in the very real human cost, the danger, the lives potentially lost guarding these supply lines from threats like roadside bombs or direct attacks. It's an enormous, incredibly complex and dangerous undertaking, and every single one of those risks, efforts, and costs gets baked into that final, sometimes exorbitant price tag per gallon.
And the scale of consumption, once that fuel actually reaches its destination, it's truly mind-boggling, as we touched on. An F-35 Lightning II, right, the cutting edge of stealth, speed, lethality, it can consume over 2,000 gallons per hour during certain phases of flight, like high-speed maneuvers or combat operations. Just think about that for a second. A single sortie for one F-35, maybe a mission lasting only a few hours, could burn through the equivalent of a small town's entire yearly heating budget. Pause and imagine that stream of dollars, hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars per minute, literally combusting inside the engine chamber. Transmute it into thrust, into speed, into the ability to project power every single second. A brief flare of energy costing more than, a family's daily bread in many parts of the world. It's an almost incomprehensible rate of financial burn.
And when you multiply this by thousands of aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports, tankers, across dozens of air forces worldwide, and you do that over decades of continuous operations, training, deployments, the total financial cost just spirals into the trillions. This is a figure so vast, so astronomical, that frankly, it loses all human meaning. It just becomes an accounting entry in the massive ledger of global power and military expenditure. And to really drive this point home, the sources highlight a truly revealing statistic. The U.S. Department of Defense. It's identified as the single largest institutional consumer of petroleum in the entire world.
Wow. The single biggest.
Yes, using more oil than many entire nations consume for all their needs combined. This isn't just about fueling planes. It's about fueling an immense global military and logistical apparatus.
That's an astonishing statistic. It really puts the sheer scale of this whole operation into perspective. It underscores that this isn't just some line item in a military budget. It's a foundational pillar of global energy demand, shaping markets and economies. But as you've pointed out so well, this monetary cost, as huge as it is really just the shallowest layer of the total expense. There are far deeper costs etched not just in budgets, but in blood, in international policy, and ultimately in the very map of the modern world itself. It's time we look beyond the balance sheet, isn't it?
Indeed. This isn't merely about money changing hands for a commodity. This financial cost, as immense as it is truly just the visible tip of a much larger iceberg. And it inexorably leads us into the profound and often deeply troubling geopolitical implications of this liquid gold, this ancient sunlight.
Okay, so we've moved beyond the raw financial cost, which, let's face it, is already monumental. Now we're venturing into something even more intricate, more pervasive, the geopolitical cost. Our sources really highlight that jet fuel isn't just a logistical component for military power, it's the strategic center of gravity, the pivot point around which military power, geopolitical influence, maybe even global stability, very literally revolve. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means that this seemingly simple need, the need for jet fuel to keep planes flying, has fundamentally shaped and continues to shape the entire global political landscape. The sources challenge us, challenge you, the listener, with these really provocative questions that resonate deeply. Why do powerful naval fleets patrol the Strait of Hormuz day in and day out? Why are critical alliances forged and sometimes shattered in the deserts of the Middle East? Why do the fates of entire nations seem to rise and fall with the fluctuating price of a barrel of crude oil? And the answer the source he provides is startling in its simplicity, but also chilling in its implication, because the sun eaters must be fed.
The sun eaters must be fed.
That's such a powerful, almost mythic phrase, isn't it? It suggests that the entire structure of modern geopolitics, our treaties, our conflicts, our economic systems, our diplomatic maneuvering is, in many crucial ways, just a vast, complex support structure built to satisfy this ravenous appetite for fuel. It's not merely a commodity, it's the strategic center of gravity. Everything pivots around ensuring reliable, affordable access to it. It sounds almost like a global addiction we're all collectively feeding.
That's a very apt comparison. A global addiction with profound consequences. And the hidden costs embedded in securing just that single gallon of JP8 are immense, far beyond any number you could put on a spreadsheet. They include the literal lives of soldiers guarding pipelines and oil installations, putting themselves in harm's way to ensure the flow continues. They encompass the vast diplomatic capital, the time, energy, political maneuvering spent securing crucial basing rights in strategically sensitive regions, often involving difficult negotiations and maybe unpopular concessions.
Right, deals you might not otherwise make. Exactly. And they certainly include the political compromises made with regimes we might otherwise condemn. Regimes whose human rights records or internal policies might directly conflict with our stated values, but we deal with them anyway, simply to ensure that steady, uninterrupted flow of supply. We accept these compromises because the alternative, a major disruption to the fuel supply, is often seen as strategically unacceptable. And of course, layered on top of all that is the silent, grinding environmental cost of its extraction, transportation, refinement, and ultimate consumption, which further compounds this mounting global debt. This isn't just about budgets. It's the fundamental calculus of international relations.
So thinking about it that way, each contrail that streaks across the blue sky, those elegant white lines we often see, it isn't just water vapor and exhaust. It's a visible manifestation, like a filament, in this vast, invisible web of power, influence, and obligation. A web greased and held together by this ancient liquid sunlight. That's an astonishing image. It implies that every single flight carries the weight of global political maneuvering, a kind of ethereal tether stretching back to distant oil fields, tanker routes, and diplomatic negotiating tables.
You've captured it perfectly. And this raises a really crucial, maybe uncomfortable question about the ultimate price of this global dependence. The sources are pretty unflinching in their assessment here. They state, the price is empire. The price is the constant low-grade fever of global tension, the ever-present risk of conflagration of actual war breaking out over the very resources required to fuel the instruments of that potential conflagration. It's a perfect, terrifying circle, isn't it? We need the fuel to project power and maintain stability, but that very need for fuel itself becomes a primary driver of conflict and instability.
It really is a kind of hidden mathematics of empire. When you think about a strike package, say a group of combat aircraft operating over the Middle East, it's not an isolated event happening right there. It's invisibly tethered, connected to pipelines snaking across thousands of miles of land, maybe through unstable regions. It's connected to super tankers crossing vast oceans, vulnerable choke points like Hormuz. It's connected to futures markets in New York or London, where traders gamble on the price of crude oil months in advance, impacting global economies, all happening thousands of miles away. Every action taken in the sky, every tactical decision made by a pilot is ultimately connected to this immense global economic and political infrastructure that is often entirely out of sight, yet absolutely vital.
And this really underscores just how deeply intertwined our military capabilities, our national security strategies, and indeed our global influence are with the complex, volatile global energy landscape. It's not just about what a nation can do technologically with its aircraft. It's also about what it needs to do, what alliances it needs to maintain, what political compromises it needs to tolerate, just to keep its machines running, to maintain its position in the world order. And this realization, this weight of geopolitical entanglement, it shifts us naturally from these external global costs to something far more internal, more human, even dare I say mythological in its resonance. It compels us to consider the very nature of the power we are actually wielding.
Which is where it gets really interesting, I think. And frankly, maybe a bit unsettling, too. This idea of fire and myth feels like a natural progression from that sun-eaters must be fed concept. We're talking about humanity wielding ancient, almost primal power here, aren't we? How does that play into our understanding of jet fuel, according to the sources? Okay, so we've navigated the practicalities, the geology, the money, the geopolitics. We've traced the fuel's journey from ancient carbon deposits to a global strategic commodity. Now let's venture even deeper. Beyond budgets and policies, into the realm of the soul, perhaps, the realm of myth. Our sources suggest that our very use of jet fuel represents this profound shift in the human condition, echoing stories as old as civilization itself. I mean, I can help but think of the myth of Icarus, right? Who strapped wings to his body, flew too close to the sun, and the wax melted. What would the ancients have thought, seeing an F-22 Raptor piercing the stratosphere, its twin engines blazing with a force that seems to defy natural law itself?
That's an incredibly apt comparison, I think, and one that really brings home the sheer scale of our technological ambition. The Greek imagination, as the sources remind us, definitely linked fire with divinity, with the power of the gods. Think about Prometheus, for instance. He famously stole flame from the gods, a forbidden act, right? And for that transgression, he was punished with eternal torment. What's truly fascinating here is how our jet fuel is presented in the sources. It's seen as a kind of modern Promethean fire, But it's refined not from the heavens, but from the black depths of the earth. Stolen not from Zeus, but from geology itself. Stolen from the deep, ancient past of our planet.
Yeah.
We're taking that incredible compressed energy that has lain dormant for hundreds of millions of years, and unleashing it with a force that would surely seem utterly divine, or perhaps utterly demonic, to anyone from antiquity. It's framed as a grand theft, if you will. Not from a god on Olympus, but a theft from time itself.
That really does feel like a profound shift in humanity's relationship with power. A Promethean theft on a geological scale, as the courses put it. We have effectively taken the stored energy of an entire epoch of life, hundreds of millions of years of photosynthesis, decay, pressure, transformation, and we've compressed its release into the hands of a single pilot. A single human being manipulating levers in a cockpit. It's a staggering thought, isn't it? This monumental harnessing of ancient power and the immense responsibility that surely must come with it.
Indeed. And if Prometheus was punished eternally for his theft of fire from the gods, well, the sources provoke us to consider this. We, too, have stolen time itself by rapidly consuming this planetary memory, this ancient sunlight. And our punishment, perhaps, is still unfolding in ways we are only just beginning to fully comprehend: climate change, resource conflicts, maybe even deeper psychological shifts. What really stands out to me is the symbolism of the combat aircraft in all of this. It's described not merely as a machine, but as the ultimate expression of this power. A tool that collapses distance in an instant, projects devastating force across vast territories, and crucially delivers death from a place its victims often cannot even see, existing beyond their immediate perception, high above. It is, in essence, the closest we have come technologically to creating a mechanical angel capable of incredible feats of speed and reach. Or perhaps a mechanical demon bringing destruction from above.
That's a chilling description, yet incredibly powerful. An angel or a demon, it truly captures the dual nature of this immense power and the ethical tightrope we walk in wielding it. And our sources offer a warning here too, don't they? That fire, once unleashed, can never truly be fully controlled. Despite all our sophisticated engineering and precision targeting, there's always an element of the untamed, a potential for unintended consequences, maybe even a gamble in every single flight. Each war waged using this Promethean fire becomes a kind of wager with energy itself, with forces far greater and more ancient than just human will or intention.
What really resonates with me here is how this ancient mythological context elevates the whole discussion. It pushes us far beyond just talking about technology specs or budget lines. It forces us to question the ethical and existential implications of wielding such immense power drawn from such a deep ancient past. It's not just about what we could do technologically anymore, it becomes about what we should do. And what the long-term, perhaps currently unforeseen consequences of this ongoing Promethean bargain might ultimately be for humanity and for the planet itself. And this line of thinking, as unsettling as it is, naturally leads us to consider an even more subtle, perhaps more insidious cost: the psychological impact of wielding such ancient, abstracted power.
Okay, let's definitely unpack that, because if the mythic cost is profound, then this psychological one, what our sources call the asymmetric cost, that might be even more insidious, something quietly reshaping us from within. Let's get into that. All right, we've touched on the mythological cost, this idea of a modern Promethean theft of time and fire, heavy stuff. Now let's delve into what our sources call the asymmetric cost, this potential erosion of connection, of empathy. The suggestion here is that the fuel does more than just power the engine. It actually fuels a certain kind of psyche, a way of interacting with the world that is profoundly removed from the raw, visceral consequences of its use. How does that actually manifest?
This is where the concept gets really unsettling, I think. It introduces a dimension beyond the usual military meaning of asymmetric warfare, where one side just has better technology or tactics. We're talking about a kind of metaphysical asymmetry here. Consider the pilot, right? They're encased in this climate-controlled cockpit, often thousands of feet up, moving at incredible speeds. They're interacting with the world below largely through a series of screens, targeting reticles, complex data feeds, sensor fusion.
Right, abstracted information.
Exactly. They are insulated quite literally and psychologically from the raw, terrestrial, ground-level consequences of the immense energy they unleash with the flick of a switch or the press of a button. They become, in a very real and profound sense described by the sources, a ghost in the machine, operating through multiple layers of technological abstraction.
A ghost in the machine. powered by the ghosts of a billion dead organisms from eons ago. That's a really powerful and chilling image, isn't it? It's just this double layer of removal. It feels like it could create a new kind of consciousness, maybe even a new kind of warfare, where the direct human element, the immediate sensory experience of cause and effect, is increasingly abstracted, sanitized, distanced.
Absolutely. The sources are incredibly vivid in describing this potentially sanitized reality. The shrieking roar of the engine, for all its immense power, it doesn't sound like screaming carboniferous ferns being crushed or ancient trilobites meeting their end. It just sounds like power. The searing heat of the afterburner doesn't feel like the direct ancient sunlight of the Paleozoic era that ultimately fueled its creation millions of years later. The entire experience of wielding this Promethean fire for the operator can become sanitized, abstracted, transformed into data points, coordinates, targeting solutions on a digital display, the visceral reality of its ancient origin, and maybe more importantly, the very real, often devastating human consequences of its deployment down on the ground. They can be effectively hidden, or at least muted, behind that digital interface.
So the fuel's true, messy, ancient origin is obscured, hidden from view. Just as the immediate, messy, human consequences of its use are kept at a convenient physical and psychological distance for those operating the machines, it's a kind of out-of-sight, out-of-mind dynamic, potentially operating on both ends, the source of the power and the result of its application. This brings us to a really uncomfortable question, doesn't it? What does this abstraction, this distance, actually do to us? To our sense of responsibility, maybe?
This truly raises a vital and, yes, deeply unsettling question posed by the sources. Is this not the greatest cost of all? This slow, perhaps unnoticed, insidious erosion of connection, of empathy, of the very sense of our place within the continuum of life on this planet. When we become so far removed, technologically and psychologically, from both the ancient source of our immense power and the tangible impact of its application, do we risk losing something fundamental about our humanity? Do we become maybe desensitized to the sheer weight, the profound implications of what we're actually doing when we unleash that power?
It feels like we've become so incredibly adept at consuming the past, at burning through that ancient sunlight and life force so efficiently, that we might have become blind to how that very act ultimately consumes, or at least profoundly impacts, our own future. We get so focused on the immediate power, the dominance, the tactical advantage this fuel grants us, that we risk ignoring the slow, grinding cost to our collective psyche, our moral compass, our connection to the planet and each other.
This metaphysical asymmetry, as the sources articulated, is a truly profound insight, I think. It suggests that the true price of this kind of technological dominance isn't just the external damage, environmental degradation, or geopolitical instability, as serious as those are. It might also be a deep internal shift in human perception, in our relationship with the world, and indeed maybe even with ourselves. And if we connect this potential internal cost to the bigger picture, well, it leads us directly to the long-term global environmental and societal debt that we are undeniably accumulating with every single gallon burned.
Which is the bill that, as they say, is always coming due. And it feels like the interest on this particular debt is compounding faster and faster these days, promising a future fundamentally shaped by the choices we continue to make today about this fuel, this power source. Okay, so if this erosion of empathy is a potential internal psychological cost, then the compounding debt of the future is the big, external, unavoidable price tag that just keeps growing with every flight, every mission, every training exercise. Our sources paint a pretty stark picture here. They suggest that as a global society, we are deeply, perhaps dangerously addicted to this nectar of the Anthropocene, this incredible ancient energy that really defines our modern technological era. And the withdrawal from this addiction, they warn, promises to be agonizing, difficult, and disruptive. What does that looming debt actually look like?
That's a crucial framing. The expense, you see, as the sources meticulously explain it, it's not a one-time payment. It's not like buying a car and being done with it. It is a debt, both ecological and societal, maybe even moral. And the interest on this debt just compounds relentlessly. With every single sortie flown, with every barrel of oil pumped from the earth, with every plume of exhaust released into the atmosphere, every flight, every military operation, every routine training exercise, each one adds incrementally to this accumulating and accelerating debt. It's a growing burden that really transcends any immediate financial costs.
And the bill, we're told pretty unequivocally by the sources, is coming due. We're already seeing the statements arrive in very tangible, undeniable ways. We see it in the form of a rapidly changing climate, disrupting ecosystems, weather patterns, and human societies across the globe. We see it in the prospect of endless resource wars as nations increasingly jostle and compete for dwindling reserves of this vital energy source, potentially leading to more conflict. And ultimately, maybe we see it in a world made increasingly brittle, more fragile, more unstable by the very power we sought to control it with in the first place. It's a powerful, potentially dangerous, self-reinforcing feedback loop that threatens the very stability we crave.
And this raises a really important, almost existential question for all of us, doesn't it? What is our collective choice in this ongoing process? Each plume of exhaust drifting across the horizon. It isn't just a trail of carbon dioxide and other compounds. It is, as the sources suggest, a stark signature of collective choice. It represents the decisions we've made in the past and the ones we continue to make every day, as a global society, as nations, and maybe even as individuals, through our consumption patterns and political priorities. Choices to pursue this particular path of power, convenience, and deep dependence on ancient, finite energy sources. It's a very tangible manifestation of our shared priorities and values, whether we consciously acknowledge them or not.
It brings us right back to that incredibly powerful analogy from our sources, the one that really seems to encapsulate the systemic impact we're discussing here. The question was never really about the specific fuel type, JP8 versus something else, or its fluctuating market price. That, the source says, is like asking a dragon what it eats and being satisfied with the simple answer, livestock. The real question, the one that should keep us awake at night, is what the dragon's diet, its constant need for fuel, does to the world it inhabits, and, crucially, what it does to the dragon itself. That really drives home the point that this isn't just about fuel logistics, it's about the fundamental long-term impact on our planet and perhaps on humanity itself.
It's such a critical point because it forces us to look beyond the immediate transaction. Beyond just buying fuel to keep things running, we have to consider the systemic consequences of feeding this metaphorical dragon of technological supremacy and global reach. The sustenance it requires is literally changing the very world it inhabits through climate change and resource depletion. And in doing so, it might also be transforming us, the dragon's creators and tenders, in profound and perhaps irreversible ways, psychologically, politically, ethically. This perspective naturally leads us to question what alternatives might exist, if any, and how the future of flight, and therefore the future of power projection, might fundamentally change. Can we actually escape this cycle? Can we find a different diet for the dragon?
Right. So if we're confronting this massive compounding debt, financial, ecological, maybe even psychological, what does that mean for the open sky ahead? What about the open question of what comes next? Are there viable alternatives to kerosene-based jet fuels? And if so, how might they fundamentally change what our sources refer to as the economy of power? Okay, so we've laid bare the immense multi-layered costs. We've talked geology, finance, geopolitics, mythology, psychology, all stemming from our current reliance on conventional jet fuel. Now let's turn our gaze towards the future, uncertain as it is. If this debt is compounding and the current path seems unsustainable in the very long term, what are the potential alternatives? And maybe more crucially, how might a shift in fuel type actually change what our sources call the economy of power? The very dynamics of how military and political might are projected and maintained around the globe.
Well, that's where innovation is constantly pushing the boundaries, isn't it? Even as we acknowledge these deep systemic issues with our current energy paradigm, the quest for new energy sources for flight continues, absolutely unabated. You hear researchers whispering, for instance, about biofuels derived from plants or algae. These have already been successfully tested, often in blends with standard JP8, and they promise a potentially greener horizon by offering a more renewable, possibly closed carbon cycle.
So less reliance on digging up ancient carbon.
Potentially, yes. Then others dream of entirely new propulsion systems, things like electrified aircraft powered by vastly improved batteries or perhaps hydrogen fuel cells. Or even further out, advanced nuclear systems for very long endurance platforms like drones or strategic bombers. These visions flicker between current feasibility and, well, future fantasy right now. But importantly, each of these potential alternatives brings its own new set of challenges, from energy density issues to massive infrastructure requirements for production and distribution to entirely new safety concerns.
These new technologies certainly offer some hope, yeah. A potential path forward, maybe a less destructive one. But our sources also introduce a stark warning, a kind of enduring paradox that might persist even if we switch fuels. Even these promising alternatives, biofuels, hydrogen, electrical, They will almost certainly come with their own unique challenges. New forms of resource extraction, new complex logistical chains, maybe new geopolitical vulnerabilities tied to rare earth minerals for batteries, or safe hydrogen production and storage. The core paradox of modernity, as the sources frame it, that our perceived dominance and freedom is often just thinly disguised dependence on some critical resource or infrastructure. That paradox may very well remain. It feels like we might just be trading one kind of tether for another.
You've articulated that paradox perfectly. Just think about it for a moment. A modern combat aircraft, whether it's a super sophisticated stealth fighter or massive transport plane, it appears as the absolute pinnacle of freedom, right? A machine able to cross borders seemingly at will, traverse vast oceans, command the skies, seemingly unbound by terrestrial limits.
Yeah, the ultimate symbol of reach and freedom.
Yet the sources powerfully highlight that each and every sortie, every single flight, is, in reality, chained, tethered. It's chained to the refueling tanker circling patiently overhead. It's chained to the vulnerable convoy of fuel trucks rumbling across a desert road. It's chained to the distant refinery churning out the specialized fuel. And ultimately, it's chained right back to the wellhead, or the mine, or the farm, where the raw materials are extracted. The F-22 Raptor may be the pinnacle of air dominance. It may soar with unparalleled agility, but its wings are effectively tied by this invisible yet incredibly strong umbilical cord of energy. It really underscores that the sharpest sword, the most advanced weapon system, still utterly depends on the softest, most vulnerable element, its fuel supply.
That's a really powerful image, the umbilical cord of energy. It fundamentally shifts your perspective, doesn't it? It begs the question, is true power really embodied in the sleek, advanced aircraft itself, or is it actually located in the massive, intricate, expensive, and often incredibly vulnerable infrastructure that's required just to keep it airborne? It feels like that sprawling network, the tankers, the pipelines, the depots, the supply lines, that might be the true Leviathan here, the real center of gravity dictating everything else.
It's a crucial distinction to make, isn't it? The sheer complexity, the immense cost, and the inherent vulnerability of that logistical circuit, that fuel supply chain. That might be the true determinant of a nation's sustainable power projection capability and global reach, rather than just the technical specifications of the individual machine. This challenge, however, this vulnerability, is also driving completely new military strategies and technologies. Consider the rapid rise of the drone, for instance. Often lighter, significantly less expensive per unit, and crucially sometimes considered more expendable than a manned aircraft with a pilot on board. Drones consume significantly less fuel for many types of missions, like surveillance or targeted strikes.
Right, changing the fuel calculus.
Exactly. Or think about hypersonic missiles. While they undoubtedly guzzle immense amounts of energy in their brief, incredibly fast, explosive flights, they aren't dependent on vulnerable, decades-long tanker convoys for sustained global operations in the same way traditional air power might be. They fundamentally alter the logistics equation of power projection.
So the actual economy of power itself might be undergoing a fundamental shift, maybe moving away from prioritizing endless endurance, sustained air patrols requiring vast fleets and tanker support, and pivoting instead towards things like extreme precision, perhaps delivered by autonomous or uncrewed systems. From large fleets constantly needing fuel to devastating targeted flashes of force, that would represent a truly fundamental reimagining of how military power is projected and maintained on a global scale. A huge shift.
It certainly would, yes. A potential paradigm shift. But what really stands out to me, even considering these potential shifts and the promising technological innovations on the horizon, is that the core question still lingers. Like the persistent scent of kerosene you smell in an old hangar. It hangs in the air. Can we ever truly unbind ourselves from combustion's long shadow? From this complex, deeply embedded Promethean bargain we've made with ancient energy? Or are we perhaps destined to carry Prometheus's flame further, higher, faster, until maybe it consumes not only the sky, but perhaps, in its ultimate final reckoning, consumes ourselves? And this profound, open-ended question, it really brings us back around, doesn't it? Back to more personal reflection. A direct connection for you, the listener.
Yes, absolutely. Because you are, whether you consciously realize it every day or not, deeply connected to this incredibly complex web of energy, power, geology, politics, and consequence that we've spent this time exploring today. We've explored the deepest past, traced the fuel back millions of years. We've looked at the staggering financial costs, the high-stakes geopolitical chess game played over oil fields and pipelines. We've considered the mythological bargain we've made, wielding Promethean fire stolen from time. We've touched on the subtle erosion of empathy that abstraction might cause, and we've peered into the uncertain, debt-laden future of fuel. But now, let me ask you more directly, more personally, what do you feel when you watch a fighter jet rise into the sky? Is it awe? At its sheer power and grace, is it maybe a pang of fear? Recognizing its destructive potential? Is it indifference, perhaps? Just another machine? Or maybe a surge of national pride?
Whatever your answer is, whatever emotion that sight evokes in you, the truth, as the sources imply, is that you are inextricably connected to this whole story. Your taxes help pay for it. Your markets are influenced by the price of oil. The air you breathe is affected by its emissions. The climate changing around you feels its impact. Your nation's politics and foreign policy are deeply shaped by the need to secure it. All of these things are touched, influenced, and shaped by the turbine's burn, by the relentless consumption of this ancient, powerful fuel. There's really no escaping the impact of this foundational energy source that underpins so much of our modern world, especially our concepts of security and power.
That's such a critical point to grasp, I think. Each plume of exhaust you see drifting across the horizon, it's not just a trail of carbon and water vapor. It is, in a very real sense, a signature of collective choice. Our choice. Every time we participate in the global economy, every time our nations make decisions about defense spending, about resource allocation, about foreign policy treaties and alliances, we are contributing to and arguably perpetuating this monumental global system, a system powered by millennia of buried sunlight.
And this brings us right back, full circle, to where we started, to our very first question. The question, what fuel powers combat aircraft? It was never merely a technical question about chemistry or logistics. It was always fundamentally a personal question. It's about our shared history as a species, our complex shared present, and our uncertain collective future. It's ultimately about what we value, what we prioritize, and what price, in all its many forms, we are truly willing to pay for power, for security, for dominance.
This deep dive has truly taken us on an incredible journey, hasn't it? Far beyond what any initial glance at a jet taking off would ever suggest. We started with the physical fuel, JP8, that highly refined kerosene, and we meticulously traced its path all the way back through deep time to its origins as distilled time and alchemized sunlight. We peeled back the layers to reveal the almost incomprehensible financial burden, the profound geopolitical influence it wields across the globe, the deep mythological resonance of Promethean fire it embodies, and the subtle yet potentially devastating ethical costs of abstraction and removed consequence that its use might exact upon us. Our sources, in the end, lead us to a powerful and frankly quite unsettling conclusion. The cost, when you add it all up, is truly immeasurable. For it may very well be ourselves, or the very future we hope to inhabit. That is the final price.
And just to reiterate that profound insight from the sources, what burns inside a modern combat aircraft? It's not merely sound and fury signifying nothing. It is signal. It is the combustion of centuries of human endeavor, ambition, and consequence, all concentrated in that engine core. You hear the roaring engines of the Industrial Revolution echo in its sound. You see the relentless geopolitical hunger for oil that has shaped so much of our modern world's conflicts and alliances. You feel the resonance of the ancient myth of Prometheus, and perhaps our ongoing Faustian bargain with technology and power. And you sense the fragile balance of freedom and dependence that defines our current age. It is ultimately, the sources suggest, the very ignition of modernity itself, flaring brilliantly, powerfully, and perhaps maybe tragically against the dark sky.
So as we stand here now, at the precipice of a future that will undoubtedly be defined by the consequences of our past energy choices, one question seems to loom largest. After we have consumed the past, after we've burned through this ancient library of life to power our complex present, what will be left to fuel our future? How much longer can we fly on this kind of fuel before the sky itself or the planet beneath it demands a different, perhaps an ultimate price? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.